Hello everyone, Jimmy back here to finish up my War of the Worlds Let's Play. See, I think we were in this particular level. Back in the rubble, as it were. Now we can see what happened to our rotund friend from earlier. Poor Dylan. The curate knelt and said some words for the creature. The whole thing seems very comical to me now. Well, let's take a look at what the Martians are doing down in the pit. The Martians hammered in the pit ceaselessly. That's what it should be. Ceaseless? I guess it shouldn't be ceaselessly. The Martians hammered in the pit ceaseless and indefatigable. For the Martians neither ate nor slept. They piloted complex mechanisms known later as handling machines, which were used to assemble their massive fighting machines. They were so fluid and dexterous, tongue-tied. They were so fluid and dexterous, I mistook them for living creatures until I noticed the Martian driver, which acted as the brain of the complicated machine. I had never given much thought as to what the function of the basket-like cage which hung from the back of the fighting machine served. I was soon to witness its dreadful purpose. If anyone is wondering why some of these vehicles and such are not moving and they're static in this scene, that's because I had difficulty thinking of sequences that could play and loop while you were reading text. This sequence, for instance. It turned out that it served as a container for captured humans. I couldn't just have the machine reach into this basket over and over again, so I decided to make these images stills. The Martians' only method of consumption was to inject fresh blood from another living donor directly into their own veins. They had a definite preference for man. Why not? Man is juicy and pink. This preference seemed to make sense, as man more closely resembled the humanoid creatures the Martians had brought with them from Mars. Unlike those creatures, however, man was very difficult to manage and often required restraint in order to safely siphon blood. The fat creatures, on the contrary, were so accepting of their fate, they lined up like children outside a taffy shop to be drained dry. I saw and heard things which I'd rather not remember, until at last I could endure no more. The curate began rambling. "It is just, O God, it is just. On me and mine be the punishment laid. We have sinned. I preached acceptable folly when I should have stood up. Now God's judgment has come upon us all." Now there are two options here for what you can do to the curate. You can run away and hide, or you can knock him out. I believe that the best option is actually to quiet him, which leads to a struggle, and that will alter the ending of the game for the curate. I tried as best I could to keep him quiet, lest we be detected. At times I pleaded, cajoled, and threatened him, but it was no use. I suddenly realized he was beyond reason, and I had been driven utterly mad. Or no, he had been driven utterly mad from what he had seen. You may notice that I have a tendency to insert words that are not actually in the sentence. It's a strange idiosyncrasy of mine. When I'm reading, I often read words that aren't in the passages. Now let's knock him out, and the Martians will come for us. Just tap as fast as you can to get away from this feeler. The sequence was dreadfully difficult to program. Now just lie still, hold the controller upright. It was difficult to convey what exactly you're supposed to do with this part. I apologize. Perhaps I can modify it and make it easier for players if they find it difficult. I woke, perceiving only hunger and a strange stillness. The food had evidently all been taken by the Martian during my lapse, and now all that remained was the residue of my previous luncheon from the day before. Fun fact, in the book, the Martians really did take all the food. Crafty. At the moment of this realization, I despaired. But by and by, I knew I must risk venturing out to find sustenance. Fortune smiled on me as the pit lay deserted, with a dead silence hanging over it. I felt a pang of remorse for the curate, who was almost certainly dead, or worse. Turns out he's not actually dead. I was desperate for nourishment, and until my hunger was satisfied, too fast for me. But yes, the curate is actually alive. Spoilers. A flock of Martian cattle grazed fat and aimless, but they appeared slightly ill, as if they suffered from some malady. Let's grab up some leftovers. Get all the food we can find. Once I had regained my energy, I now began to think clearly again. My immediate concern was for my own survival, and I reasoned that London might be the best chance, or my best chance, for sanctuary. I encountered a particularly surly humanoid blocking my path. He seemed to have some cause to dislike me, and was willing to act on his impulse to attack me. I always theorized that this particular Martian humanoid is actually suffering from fever and delusions, which might explain why he is more hostile. Sickness might make them a tad aggressive in some cases. Anyway, we finished him off. Just push his little plump body out of the way. Who goes there? There's nothing here. This is my territory. A man called to me, brandishing a sword. I shan't attempt any accents this time around. I was feeling a bit lackadaisical today. At first, I did not recognize the dirty, bedraggled figure, but as I saw him better, I realized it was the artilleryman. "Oh, it's you, the man at Weybridge," he said, lowering his saber. "Good luck. We are lucky ones," he proceeded to explain how he had survived his encounter with the Martians. I scurried like a rat and hid myself in a drain. Sewers ain't that bad, really, once you get used to them. This sequence was a bit different from the other, being a first-person sequence. I wanted to make it feel like the sewer was sort of safe and comforting. Few men know the comfort and security of a sewer. It's a bit like mother's embrace. The Martians think they have got us beat, but they ain't thought of economics yet. The market will do them in. At this point, I was trying to depict the various rationalizations one comes up with when one cannot admit defeat. I believe the novel had similar aspects. Them few as survive are going to have to be made of sterner stuff. Only the strong who can pull up their bootstraps and knuckle down will make it. Sounds a bit like my uncle. I had difficulty getting the visuals to look exactly as I wanted. The sewer looked a bit too clean, and when I was working on it, I had to add a little extra grime and such. It still looks a tad too clean, but I did my best. Wanted it to be a little shiny as well, to look wet. Some sort of, just a second, spider crawling up me. Don't want the poor fellow to tickle me. He might get smashed. I'm not sure why spiders crawl all over me all the time. I think they would know better. On my way to London, I saw lights in the sky. They had learned to fly. Avoid the lights. I wanted the design of the flying machines to look a bit more archaic than what we would imagine now. They use some sort of gas or hot air to float their machines in the air, as opposed to turbines or some sort of propeller system that we would expect now. To kind of fit in with the time period that the novel was written. Give it a little bit of authenticity. Almost got caught there. Oops. Seems a handling machine is out to get us. Don't know if I can get away from it. He's not very good at aiming, is he? Fly? It's over then. They'll simply go round the world. It's up for humanity. We're down. We're beat. We're all just ants to them, except we're eatable ants. They mean to smash us up, and then make us their livestock. I've thought it through. They haven't begun on us yet. Haven't begun? All that's happened to us so far is because we haven't had the good sense to stay out of their way. We've worried them with guns and such nonsense. We can't win, so we need to think about survival. There's miles of sewer under London, all sweet and clean after the rain, with no one stinking them up. Somehow I doubt that the sewer would be that pleasant even after the rain, but I'm not there. Wouldn't be able to judge precisely. The weak are going to have to clear out. We haven't got room for layabouts and useless types, always running around, fretting about their silly jobs and jumping when the boss says jump. They'll be big, fat, sweet-blooded rubbish when the Martians get through with them. Pretty soon they'll wonder how we ever got on without the Martians. I can't believe it. You really think? You know it's true. I thought you might have been one of them. One of the weak ones, that is. You're a bit slender and soft, no offense. This part is more or less taken directly from the book. I'm not sure about the location. I believe the actual place in which this conversation took place was on Mayberry Hill, but I changed some things. We shan't argue about that. Tell me more about your plan. We can use men like you. I'm no stranger to the concept of death. I ain't an ornamental soldier. Dying ain't so bad. It's the funkin' that's bad. We have to avoid devolving into big rats. That's where you come in. We need educated types like you to teach the kids. Not poems and rubbish, but science. We've got to always be learning and expanding our knowledge. That's how we keep them from devolving. How we keep from devolving. We'll need good, sensible women, too. No eye-rolling or la-di-da types. Survival is all that matters. One day, maybe, we'll capture a fighting machine. Imagine that. The Martians, all out in their fighting machines, every one of them, are fumbling or got a screw loose. Our lads who give themselves up to the Martians will see to that. And then we come with our heat ray, and whoosh, the Earth belongs to man again. The whole idea was quite unrealistic. He spoke so authoritatively. I should say, but he spoke so authoritatively, that I myself began to believe his wild fancies. I even agreed to accompany him to his redoubt in the sewers of London. He referenced it as being very significant to his schemes. We can dig tunnels everywhere. I'm working on tunneling to a nearby warehouse. Take a look. There was actually supposed to be a sequence in between these two scenes in which you would explore the sewers and do a little bit of combat with the sword. You'd play as the artilleryman, but I cut it out because it seemed to detract from the rest of the story and didn't really establish that much. He showed me a hole he had been digging for a week, not more than 5 feet long. I could have reached that length in an hour's work. I suddenly had my first inkling of the gap between his dreams and his powers. I did my best to help him despite my perceptions, and after a half hour, he called for a recess. "I think I'm a bit worn out. Let's have a bit of relaxation," he said, as if we had accomplished anything of merit. This scene, in particular, took a lot of work to animate, weirdly. You wouldn't think it, but there were a lot of collision errors and various things that made it difficult. It seems strange to imagine it now, but we actually played cards. He even produced some champagne, which he had doubtless salvaged from some abandoned house. After a time, I began to feel I was a traitor to my race for squandering my time playing cards, while mankind was in jeopardy. I had to make a decision. Leave when he's looking the other way, convince him to come to his senses. Now, if you want the best ending for the artilleryman, or at least what I think is the best ending, I would go with leave him when he's not looking, or when he's looking the other way. The Martians won't know what hit him. What kind of world is this for a man to be born into? Oh God, why? It's one big joke. I like the artilleryman. I groped my way up out of the sewers, expecting the worst. London was unrecognizable, a great desert of smashed houses and ash-covered streets. Such a sad end for the hub of an empire. Even the red weed had begun to wither and die. I was so weary and footsore, I laid myself upon the pavement, not caring if the Martians found me. My mind and soul had endured so much torment, I felt numb. I drifted off into slumber. Maybe one day we'll capture a fighting machine. Imagine that. I dreamt I was in a fighting machine. Against all logic, I understood its operation. The power was in my hands. Was now in my hands. All around me stood a host of Martians. My thoughts raced, and all at once I knew what I was about to do. One of my favorite sequences wasn't in the novel, but I had a lot of fun with it. I don't actually think the interior of the fighting machines look this way. I kind of imagine that the narrator's imagination made them look more like a human machine. You know, with a seat and all that. Little less complex than they might actually be on the inside. I believe some people who played this segment thought it was a bit too long and overstayed its welcome. So I reduced the amount of objectives you're given. I still don't know, though, if it would be, you know, a bit too long. Maybe it still overstays its welcome a bit. If anyone happens to play this, you could leave a comment and tell me if you think it's a little bit too arduous. When you're a developer and you put work into these things, you kind of want to get, your full money's worth, so to speak. Of course, no money was involved, but you understand my expression. I just thought, if I'm going to put this much work into programming something, it had better be worth it. Get a lot of mileage out of it. I also changed the control scheme to make it a little bit more user-friendly. The original control scheme felt more natural to me, for some reason. Maybe I'm an alien, and I don't control things the normal way people do, but I was willing to alter it so that my audience might find it more enjoyable. I believe square was originally the fire button. I liked the sequence so much when I was programming it, I thought of perhaps having a whole game centered around this concept. But I have a lot of things on my mind. I get so many ideas, it's quite ridiculous. I'll never realize all of them, but I can get the best ones. These little short ones are very annoying. They're more difficult to hit. Almost done, just 9 more to go. I kind of like doing this. I could see though why people might find it a bit, arduous, shall we say. Just shooting the same target over and over again could get a bit, bothersome. Also the speed of the tripod. I wanted it to feel heavy, so it's a bit slow, and that might be irritating to some people, which I can understand. Don't really use the black smoke much. I suppose it is an effective deterrent, but the heat ray is much more fun to use. Let's put out a little black smoke. We know those little crawly things are going to try to come up and get us. So we might as well put some black smoke at our feet to deter such things. You really don't want the tripods to get within range because they do a lot of damage. I might do a vehicle game sometime. A game where you just shoot things in a vehicle. I've already dabbled in it a bit, even before making this section. I believe in the never-ending dream I included a vehicle segment. Something's really satisfying about sitting in a big mechanized platform and unloading all sorts of weaponry. I think that's the end. Another spider. I was no longer restrained, no longer the victim, no longer human. Such a hideous dream. Sometimes getting what you desire is worse than death. I awoke. I was a man walking in a graveyard, my footsteps echoing through the tombstone faces of the... I now perceived my loneliness more acutely. I knelt, and for the first time I prayed in earnest. This is actually in the book, by the way. It happens at a different point in time. Oola. The fog cleared, revealing a fighting machine. I was seized with an insane resolve. I would give myself up to them. End it here and now. My ending to War of the Worlds is a bit unusual in that I think it's the only version in which the protagonist actually shows any pity for the Martians. And then it stopped. I had spared my life. Oh, it had spared my life. Oola. I will never forget that sound, the sound of death. The Martians in their prime were the things of nightmare, unstoppable, infinitely cruel. Now they whimpered as unruly children awaiting their punishment. I really like this sequence. Kind of sets my adaptation apart from the others a bit. Definitely wasn't in the book, but I like it. It was the humblest of God's creations which had vanquished them. Bacteria. From the moment they had set foot on Earth, they were doomed. Nice, happy ending. Took a bit of work to animate these crowds of people, but it was worth it. The pulse of life would beat again. My dear brother had survived also. As life returns to normal, the question of another attack from Mars causes universal concern. It may be that they are planning a counterattack. Several eruptions of gas were seen heading towards the planet Venus. By the way, I believe I spotted a typo. I might fix that later. It was very satisfying to reach this end, having developed this game for, I believe it was 3 weeks? Not exactly certain. It sounds short now, but when I was working on it, it felt like a long time. Certain decisions you made throughout the game may affect certain outcomes for characters. The artilleryman came to his senses, and has become a prolific author of philosophical novels. His most noted works are The Morlock Mindset and The Pit of Man. The curate received a nasty bump, but managed to escape detection by the Martians. He continues his work in the church and considers the Martian invasion as instrumental in him finding true redemption. Definitely not in the book. The curate dies in the book, but I like the idea that the player could alter details a bit. There is another ending where the curate is dead, just like in the book. I and the curate meet from time to time, and have quite forgiven each other's actions during the invasion. Excuse me. A bit of gas from the nether regions. 2 artillerymen who slew the Martian fighting machine at Weybridge survived the attack and received the Victoria Cross for their valorous actions. The Thunderchild went down with all hands, but due to the actions of her crew, 3,568 people escaped to sea, eventually landing safely in France. In the year 1911, a single Martian cylinder landed in Russia. No Martians were discovered, just a tiny metallic spool with inscriptions in multiple languages scrawled on its surface. Its universal meaning was a single word: help. Also not in the book. Among other things, the protagonist has a mental breakdown in the actual book, I believe. But that's not very happy now, is it? Because he recovers, but it is a bit of a downer. Special thanks to Zerk Music, who created most of the music I used in the game. Big thanks to Willow the Bob, who created the horse I used. If Mr. Zerk Music is watching this, big special thank you for the music. I originally was going to get El Divisimo to make the music, but he was busy, which I actually think was a blessing in disguise, because the music strangely fits this creation very well. And I am satisfied with the end result. All visual assets were created by yours truly, except the explosions, which Billy Cultist created. Oh, dear old Billy, always making explosions. By the way, this is true of most of my games. I actually make all the sculpts and all the environmental details myself, all the furnishings, everything. Some of my earlier games are exceptions, but most of my recent games, post-Fetch Quest, or before, even some before, I made all these sculpts myself. Thank you for playing The War of the Worlds. Check out the original novel, which is amazing. True. Do check out the original novel. It makes this experience more enjoyable, and the novel, after all, is the wellspring from which this idea flows. The end. No, that wasn't too bad. I suppose we're done now. If you like what we're doing here on EDC, don't forget to like and subscribe. And that's all for today, everyone. Leave a comment if you want to see more Let's Plays or any other type of video. Maybe you want to see a tutorial. We have our own ideas, but a little audience feedback helps. Thank you very much. Goodbye.